Hello. Hi, Emma. How's my Emma? We're going to start a new Dr. Dolittle book today, and I wanted to welcome Claire and Emmy because I think they might enjoy listening too. So, hi, Claire. Hi, Emmy. We're going to read a book from this volume, which has 3 books inside of it. See how big it is? And it's called The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle. And this is a pretty long book, but we'll read it in chapters. So, I'm going to start with what's called the prologue. And a prologue is some text that the writer of the book, whose name in this case is Hugh Lofting, writes before he starts the story. So there's something he wants to tell us in the prologue that is not a part of the actual story. So we'll start with that, okay? Prologue. All that I have written so far about Dr. Dolittle, I heard long after it happened from those who had known him. Indeed, a great deal of it took place before I was born. But I now come to set down that part of the great man's life that I myself saw and took part in. Many years ago, the doctor gave me permission to do this. But we were both of us so busy then voyaging around the world, having adventures and filling notebooks full of natural history, that I never seemed to get time to sit down and write of our doings. Now, of course, when I'm quite an old man, my memory isn't good any more. But whenever I am in doubt and have to hesitate and think, I always ask Polynesia, the parrot. That wonderful bird, she is now nearly 250 years old, sits on the top of my desk, usually humming sailor songs to herself while I write this book. And as everyone who ever met her knows, Polynesia's memory is the most marvelous memory in the world. If there is any happening I am not quite sure of, she is always able to put me right, and to tell me exactly how it took place, who was there, and everything about it. In fact, sometimes I almost think I ought to say that this book was written by Polynesia instead of me. Very well then, I will begin. And first of all, I must tell you something about myself and how I came to meet the doctor. Chapter 1, The Cobbler's Son. My name was Tommy Stubbins, son of Jacob Stubbins, the cobbler of Puddleby on the Marsh. A cobbler is a shoemaker. And I was 9.5 years old. At that time, Puddleby was only quite a small town. A river ran through the middle of it, and over this river there was a very old stone bridge called King's Bridge, which led you from the market-place on one side to the churchyard on the other. Sailing ships came up this river from the sea and anchored near the bridge. I used to go down and watch the sailors unloading the ships upon the river wall. The sailors sang strange songs as they pulled upon the ropes, and I learned these songs by heart. And I would sit on the river wall with my feet dangling over the water and sing with the men, pretending to myself that I too was a sailor. For I longed always to sail away with those brave ships when they turned their backs on Puddleby Church and went creeping down the river again, across the wide, lonely marshes to the sea. I longed to go with them out into the world to seek my fortune in foreign lands, Africa, India, China, and Peru. And here's a picture. It says, I would sit on the river wall with my feet dangling over the water. Let's see. See him? There's Tommy Stubbins. And that's the river, and that's his town. That's Puddleby. When they got round the bend, this is the ships of the river, and the water was hidden from view, you could still see their huge brown sails towering over the roofs of the town, moving onward slowly, like some gentle giants that walked among the houses without noise. What strange things would they have seen, I wondered, when next they came back to anchor at Kingsbridge. And dreaming of the lands I had never seen, I'd sit on there, watching till they were out of sight. 3 great friends I had in Puddleby in those days. One was Joe, the mussel man, who lived in a tiny hut by the edge of the water under the bridge. This old man was simply marvelous at making things. I never saw a man so clever with his hands. He used to mend my toy ships for me, which I sailed upon the river. He built windmills out of packing cases and barrel staffs, and he could make the most wonderful kites from old umbrellas. Joe would sometimes take me on his muscle boat, and when the tide was running out, we would paddle down the river as fast as the edge of the sea, as far as the edge of the sea, to get mussels and lobsters to sell. And out there on the cold, lonely marshes, we would see wild geese flying, and curlews and redshanks, and many other kinds of seabirds that live among the samphire and the long grass of that great salt fen. And as we crept up the river in the evening, when the tide had turned, we would see the lights on Kingsbridge twinkle in the dusk, reminding us of tea time and warm fires. Another friend I had was Matthew Mugg, the cat's meat man. He was a funny old person with a bad squint. He looked rather awful, but he was really quite nice to talk to. He knew everybody in Puddleby, and he knew all the dogs and all the cats. In those times, being a cat's meat man was a regular business, and you could see one nearly any day going through the streets with a wooden tray full of pieces of meat stuck on skewers, crying, "Meat! M-E-A-T!" People paid him to give this meat to their cats and dogs instead of feeding them dog biscuits or scraps from the table. So this was a long time ago, and they didn't have regular cat food like we get at the store. So there were people that would sell meat for the cats and dogs in the street. I enjoyed going round with old Matthew and seeing the cats and dogs come running to the garden gates whenever they heard his call. Sometimes he let me give the meat to the animals myself, and I thought this was great fun. He knew a lot about dogs, and he would tell me the names of the different kinds as we went through the town. He had several dogs of his own. One, a whippet, was a very fast runner, and Matthew used to win prizes with her at the Saturday coursing races. Another, a terrier, was a fine ratter. The cat's meat man used to make a business of rat catching for the millers and farmers, as well as his other trade of selling cat meat. My third great friend was Luke the hermit. Do you know what a hermit is? It's a person who lives all by himself. A lot of times they live in caves or in the woods. They're called hermits. They just want to be by themselves. So he says his other great friend was Luke the hermit. He said, but I will tell you of him later on. I did not go to school because my father was not rich enough to send me, but I was extremely fond of animals. So I used to spend my time collecting birds' eggs and butterflies, fishing in the river, rambling through the countryside after blackberries and mushrooms, and helping the mussel man mend his nets. Yes, it was a very pleasant life I lived in those days long ago, though of course I did not think so then. I was 9.5 years old, and like all boys, I wanted to grow up, not knowing how well off I was with no cares and nothing to worry me. Always I longed for the time when I should be allowed to leave my father's house, to take passage in one of those brave ships, to sail down the river through the misty marshes of the sea, out into the world to seek my fortune. Chapter 2. I hear of the great naturalist. That's Dr. Dolittle, the great naturalist. One early morning in the springtime, when I was wandering among the hills at the back of the town, I happened to come upon a hawk with a squirrel in its claws. It was standing on a rock, and the squirrel was fighting very hard for its life. The hawk was so frightened when I came upon it, suddenly like this, that it dropped the poor creature and flew away. That's good. I picked the squirrel up and found that 2 of its legs were badly hurt. So I carried it in my arms back to the town. When I came to the bridge, I went to the mussel man's hut, and I asked him if he could do anything for it. Joe put on his spectacles and examined it carefully. Then he shook his head. "Young critter's got a broken leg," he said, "and another badly cut and all. I can mend you your boats, Tom, but I haven't the tools nor the learnin' to make a broken squirrel seaworthy. This is a job for a surgeon, and for a right smart one as well. There be only one man I know who could save yon critter's life, and that's John Dolittle." "Who is John Dolittle?" I asked. "Is he a vet?" "No," said the mussel man. "He's no vet. Dr. Dolittle is a naturalist." "What's a naturalist?" "A naturalist," said Joe, putting away his glasses and starting to fill his pipe, "is a man who knows all about animals and butterflies and plants and rocks and all. John Dolittle is a very great naturalist. I'm surprised you never heard of him, and you daft over animals. He knows a whole lot about shellfish that I know from my own knowledge. He is quite a man and doesn't talk much, but there's folks who do say he's the greatest naturalist in the world." "Where does he live?" I asked. "Over on the Oxenthorpe Road, t'other side of town. Don't know just which house it is, but most anyone cross there could tell you, I reckon. Go and see him. He's a great man." So I thanked the mussel man, took up my squirrel again, and started off toward the Oxenthorpe Road. The first thing I heard as I came to the marketplace was someone calling, "Meat, M-E-A-T." "There's Matthew Mugg," I said to myself. "He'll know where the doctor lives." Matthew knows everyone. So I hurried across the marketplace and caught him up. "Matthew," I said, "do you know Dr. Dolittle?" "Do I know Dr. Dolittle?" he said. "Well, I should think I do. I know him as well as I know my own wife. Better, sometimes, I think. He's a great man, a very great man." "Can you show me where he lives?" I asked. "I want to take the squirrel to him. It has a broken leg." "Certainly," said the cat's meat man. "I'll go right by his house directly. Come along and I'll show you." So off we went together. "Oh, I've known John Dolittle for years and years," said Matthew, as we made our way out of the marketplace. "But I'm pretty sure he ain't home just now. He's away on a voyage, but he's liable to be back any day. I'll show you his house, and then you'll know where to find him." All the way down the Oxenthorpe Road, Matthew hardly stopped talking about his great friend, Dr. John Dolittle, M.D. He talked so much that he forgot all about calling out "meat" until we both suddenly noticed that we had a whole procession of dogs following us patiently. "Where did the doctor go on his voyage?" I asked Matthew, as I handed round meat to the dogs. "I couldn't tell you," he answered. "Nobody ever knows where he goes, nor when he's going, nor when he's coming back. He lives all alone except for his pets. He's made some great voyages and some wonderful discoveries. Last time he came back, he told me he'd met a native people in the Pacific Ocean. Lived on 2 islands, they did. The husbands lived on one island and the wives on the other. Sensible people, them. They only met once a year, when the husbands came over to visit the wives for a great feast. Christmas time, most likely. Yes, he's a wonderful man, the doctor. And as for animals, well, there ain't no one knows as much about 'em as what he does." "How did he get to know so much about animals?" I asked. The cat's meat man stopped and leaned down to whisper in my ear. "He talks their language," he said in a hoarse, mysterious voice. "The animals' language?" I cried. "Why, certainly," said Matthew. "All animals have some kind of language. Some sorts talk more than others. Some only speak in sign language. But the doctor, he understands them all, birds as well as animals. We keep it a secret, though, him and me, because folks only laugh at you when you speak of it. Why, he can even write animal language. He reads aloud to his pets. He's wrote history books in monkey talk, poetry in canary language, and comic songs for magpies to sing. In fact, he's now busy learning the language of the shellfish. But he says it's hard work, and he has caught some terrible colds, holding his head under water so much. He's a great man. He certainly must be, I said. I do wish he were home so I could meet him. Well, there's his house, look, said the cat meat man. That little one at the bend in the road there, the one high up, like it was sitting on the wall above the street. We were now beyond the edge of the town, and the house that Matthew pointed out was quite a small one, standing by itself. There seemed to be a big garden around it, and this garden was much higher than the road, so you had to go up a flight of steps in the wall before you reached the front gate at the top. I could see that there were many fine fruit trees in the garden, for their branches hung down over the wall in places. But the wall was so high I could not see anything else. When we reached the house, Matthew went up the steps to the front gate, and I followed him. I thought he was going to go into the garden, but the gate was locked. A dog came running down from the house, and he took several pieces of meat that the cat's meat men pushed through the bars of the gate, and some paper bags full of corn and bran. I noticed that this dog did not stop to eat the meat, as any ordinary dog would have done, but he took all of the things back to the house and disappeared. He had a curious wide collar around his neck, which looked as though it were made of brass or something. Then we left. The doctor isn't back yet, said Matthew, or the gate wouldn't be locked. What were all those things in paper bags you gave the dog? I asked. Oh, those were provisions, said Matthew, things for the animals to eat. The doctor's house is simply full of pets. I give the things to the dog while the doctor's away, and the dog gives them to the other animals. And what was that curious collar he was wearing around his neck? That's a solid gold dog collar. It was given to him when he was with the doctor on one of his voyages long ago. He saved a man's life. And Emma, you'll remember that, right? That was in the last book we read, called The Story of Dr. Dolittle. And we can send that one to Claire and Emmy as well. Oh, that's a long time. I'm sorry. How long has the doctor had him? I asked. Oh, that's a long time. Jip's getting pretty old now. That's why the doctor doesn't take him on his voyages anymore. He leaves him behind to care for the house. Every Monday and Thursday, I bring the food to the gate here and give it to him through the bars. He never lets anyone come inside the garden while the doctor's away, not even me, though he knows me well. But you'll always be able to tell if the doctor's back or not, because if he is, the gate will surely be open. So I went off home to my father's house and put my squirrel to bed in an old wooden box full of straw, and there I nursed him myself and took care of him as best I could till the time should come when the doctor would return. And every day I went to the little house with the big garden on the edge of the town and tried the gate to see if it was locked. Sometimes the dog, Jip, would come down to the gate to meet me, but though he always wagged his tail and seemed glad to see me, he never let me come inside the garden.